So you just bought a Premier League football club. The deal closed this morning. Your name is on the paperwork. Somewhere across the city, fans are already printing scarves with your face on them. You own players worth hundreds of millions of dollars. You own a stadium that fills 60,000 seats every other Saturday. You own a global brand broadcast into more than 180 countries. It feels like the best investment on earth. It isn't. Within 12 months, you could be down tens of millions of dollars, locked into a financial rulebook so strict it can take points off your team before a ball is even kicked, and discovering that the man who sold you the club walked away with more money than you'll make in the next 5 years combined. Welcome to the strangest asset class in modern business. Across England alone, foreign investors now control roughly half of Premier League clubs. American ownership groups names like Fenway Sports Group, Kroenke Sports, and 49 ERS Enterprises have poured billions into a sport most of them grew up never watching. Sovereign wealth funds sit courtside. Private equity firms that once specialized in industrial manufacturing now specialize in midfielders. So here's the real question. If football clubs lose money almost every single year, why do the world's richest people keep lining up to buy them? We'll get to that. But first, you need to understand what you actually just bought. Buying a Premier League club rarely means writing one enormous check. It means engineering a structure. In 2023, a New York-based hedge fund called Knighthead Capital Management took control of Birmingham City, a storied but struggling English club 2 divisions below the Premier League. The deal brought in football royalty as a minority investor, 7-time Super Bowl champion Tom Brady. The headlines wrote themselves. A global icon, joining the board of a Midlands football club most Americans had never heard of. Here's what those headlines didn't mention. Brady's actual ownership stake was just 3.3%. Imagine being one of the most famous athletes alive, attaching your name and your time to a takeover, appearing in documentary footage, agonizing over results and owning a sliver smaller than most people's retirement accounts. That's not an insult to Brady. That's the modern playbook. Bring in star power for visibility and credibility. Let the real capital and the real control sit elsewhere. And the on-field reality was brutal almost immediately. Birmingham were relegated in Knighthead's first season in charge. 4 different managers cycled through the dugout in a single campaign. The club's prized new stadium project, designed to hold over 60,000 fans, remains years from completion. Brady himself later admitted, on camera, that the first season was simply terrible. This is the part nobody tells you when they show you the trophy case. You're not just buying a team, you're buying a business with the most unpredictable revenue driver, imaginable 11 players on a field, 90 minutes, with your entire financial model riding on the result. But here's where things get genuinely strange. Most leveraged buyouts in business use enormous amounts of borrowed money. Football is no different, except English football actually puts a leash on it. Since 2023, Premier League rules cap leveraged buyout debt at roughly 65% of a club's value. That sounds responsible. It also means that even the world's biggest private equity firms can't simply load a club with debt the way they might, a chain of hotels or a struggling retailer. The risk gets pushed back onto the owner's own balance sheet. Which raises an obvious question. If the debt ceiling is lower and the losses keep piling up, where does the money actually come from to keep these clubs running? We'll come back to that. First, you need to meet the rule book that governs almost everything a Premier League owner is legally allowed to do with their own money. It's called the Profit and Sustainability Regulations, and most fans have never read a word of it. Most owners wish they hadn't either. The basic rule sounds simple enough. A club can lose no more than £105 million, roughly $134 million across any rolling 3-year period. Lose more than that. And the punishment isn't just a fine, it's points deducted from your actual league position. Everton discovered this the hard way. Docked points mid-season for breaching the limit, a penalty that nearly dragged them into relegation. Here's the twist, almost nobody outside football finance understands. When a club signs a player for $50 million, that $50 million doesn't hit the books all at once. It gets spread out, amortized across the length of the contract. Sign a player to a 5-year deal, and your accountants only record $10 million of cost per year, no matter that the entire fee left the bank account on day one. For a while, some clubs took this to an extreme. Why not sign a player to an 8-year contract instead of 5? Spread the cost even thinner. Make a $500 million spending spree look almost reasonable on paper. One London club became infamous for exactly this strategy, until the Premier League stepped in and capped amortization at 5 years for everyone. Think about that for a second. Football clubs were essentially using contract length as a financial smokescreen. The actual football didn't change. The accounting did. It gets stranger. Wages, the single largest expense at almost every club, don't get the amortization treatment at all. A player's salary hits the books in full every single year, no spreading allowed. Which means two clubs can spend the exact same total in a single transfer window and land in completely different financial positions, depending purely on how that money was split between the transfer fee and the weekly paycheck. Football executives aren't just negotiating with rival clubs anymore. They're negotiating with a rulebook. And that's not even the strangest trick in the playbook. Selling your own academy graduate, a player who cost you nothing to develop, counts as almost pure profit on the books, even if the transfer fee is modest. Some clubs have been accused of selling players to other clubs under the same ownership umbrella at inflated prices, purely to balance the books before the deadline. Regulators call them associated party transactions. Everyone else calls them swap deals, dressed up in spreadsheets. This is the hidden ledger of football ownership. The sport you watch on Saturday and the business you'd actually be signing up to run are almost two different universes. Now here's where the real empire building begins, and it's the part most fans have no idea even exists. You'd assume each Premier League club stands alone, competing fiercely against its rivals. In reality, a growing number of clubs are simply outposts of much larger, multinational holding companies. The pioneer was Manchester City's ownership group, which built something called City Football Group in 2013. Today, that single company owns or holds stakes in clubs on 5 continents: Manchester City, New York City, FC, Melbourne City, Mumbai City, and several more, all sharing scouting networks, sports science, and a single global brand strategy. It worked. City's commercial revenue alone grew from roughly £80 million a year before the group formed to around £400 million annually. Now, with global sponsors like Etihad Airways and Puma signing deals that span the entire portfolio, not just one club. And City Football Group is no longer the exception. It's becoming the rule. Between 2015 and 2023, the number of football clubs operating under some form of multi-club ownership exploded from 62 to over 300 worldwide. Today, by some estimates, more than 40% of clubs across Europe's top 5 leagues sit inside one of these ownership webs. Chelsea's American ownership group, Blueco, didn't stop at Stamford Bridge. They went out and bought a French club, RC Strasbourg, partly to use as a development pipeline for young talent before it's ready for the Premier League. Strasbourg's transfer business now runs almost like a satellite office of Chelsea's recruitment department, scouting and developing players who may never wear a Strasbourg shirt for more than a season before moving on up the ownership chain to London. To put the scale of this shift in perspective, the number of distinct multi-club ownership groups operating worldwide more than doubled in just 5 years, expanding from 58 to over 120. That's not a handful of wealthy owners experimenting with a side project. That's an entirely new industry structure forming underneath the sport, largely invisible to the fans buying tickets. Here's the uncomfortable truth underneath all of it. When the same ownership group controls 2 clubs, who exactly are they trying to win for? A smaller club inside one of these networks can quietly become a feeder system, developing, polishing, and eventually exporting its best players up the chain to the flagship club, sometimes for fees that look suspiciously convenient on paper. Fans of the smaller clubs start asking an uncomfortable question. Is our club really trying to win, or are we just a farm system with a stadium attached? Regulators are starting to ask the same question. European football's governing body has flagged these related party transfers for closer scrutiny, worried that a sport built on fierce, independent competition is quietly becoming something closer to a single global corporation operating under 20 different jerseys. Now, remember that hidden cost we promised to come back to. The one most fans never see splashed across a transfer headline. It's not the players, it's the stadium. When the Friedkin Group, an American ownership group that also owns Italian giants AS Roma, took control of Everton in December 2024. They inherited one of the most ambitious and most financially exposed stadium projects in English football history. Everton's new home, an $800 million waterfront stadium on the River Mersey, had been financed largely through high-interest debt under the previous ownership. Picture the scale of that number for a moment. $800 million is roughly what it costs to build and equip several major hospitals. And Everton spent it building somewhere for people to watch 90 minutes of football 25 times a year. The Friedkins moved fast, arranging a £350 million refinancing deal with investment bank JP Morgan to convert that punishing short-term debt into something far more manageable. They also converted the previous owner's emergency loans directly into company shares, essentially trading debt for ownership stake to stabilize the balance sheet. Why go to such lengths for a building? Because a stadium isn't just where the games happen anymore. It's a hospitality business, a concert venue, an events company, and a real estate play, all wrapped inside 90 minutes of football. Everton's new stadium has already hosted rugby league internationals, cricket test matches, and music events, and ticket prices have risen sharply since the move, even as the club's matchday revenue, which had quietly fallen behind almost every other major Premier League club for over a decade, finally starts catching up. That's the trade fans rarely get told about directly. The shinier the stadium, the higher the price of admission tends to climb. The most expensive hospitality box at Everton's new ground now costs £50,000 a season. Somewhere between the steel beams and the sponsorship banners, the ordinary supporter quietly becomes a smaller and smaller priority. So if losses are constant, debt is everywhere, and the rulebook keeps tightening, why does anyone still want in? Because starting with the 2026-27 season, the entire financial system is being rebuilt. The old loss limit rules are being replaced by something called squad cost ratio, which simply caps how much of a club's actual football revenue, not outside investment, actual revenue can be spent on wages and transfer fees. The ceiling sits at 85%. Spend more than that on your playing squad relative to what you earn, and you're in breach before you've broken any old style loss limit at all. It's a fundamental shift in philosophy. The old rules asked, how much can you lose? The new rules ask, how much can you actually afford to earn your way into? For state-backed and private equity-funded clubs alike, that closes a door that used to be propped wide open by a willing owner's checkbook. And yet capital keeps arriving, because underneath every painful headline about points deductions and stadium debt sits one undeniable fact. Premier League broadcast revenue alone now exceeds £10 billion in cumulative deals since the league's founding. Matchday income across the league is projected to cross £1 billion for the first time this season, the first league in the world to do so. Club valuations, tracked by outlets like Forbes and Deloitte, keep climbing year after year, regardless of how much Reading shows up on the annual accounts. Owning a football club, it turns out, was never really about the profit and loss statement. The asset itself appreciates in ways the accountants on the loss column can't capture: global attention, political access, brand association, and a permanent seat inside one of the only entertainment products on earth that reliably draws hundreds of millions of live viewers every single week, with no script and no guaranteed outcome. That unpredictability is exactly what makes it priceless, and exactly what makes it terrifying. The next decade of football ownership is already taking shape. More multi-club empires, tighter financial enforcement, American capital continuing to flow across the Atlantic in search of an asset class that behaves nothing like real estate, private equity, or any business school case study. The clubs that survive this era won't necessarily be the ones that spend the most. They'll be the ones that finally figure out how to make the math, not just the magic, actually work. If you want to understand where global capital is really headed next, you might want to start watching the world's most popular sport a little more closely than you think. Subscribe to Magnate for more deep dives into the hidden economics behind the world's biggest businesses.